Okay, it's been a while. Bookstuda! Hello! Welcome to my new apartment, which is now... I've lived here since August, and it is December 15th. Hopefully I will get this up this week. I have filmed a lot of content that I have just not edited because my best editing software is on my home computer, not work, and I am at work a lot. I've also traveled a lot this year. One of the videos that I filmed and did not upload or edit is the books I was taking with me to India. I went to India, I went to El Paso, Texas for work, and then we moved the week I got back. So it's been very busy. I haven't read as much as I'd like, but this past week I have been reading like a fiend. And so I'm like ready to get back into BookTube. I'm getting my bullet journal ready for next year, and I've been watching so many bullet journal videos. So I think I'm gonna film one of those next. It'll be my first one, so hopefully it comes out okay. Today I am bringing you, after that long intro, my top reads of 2018. I don't really have a number here. I tried to get 10 and then I was like, oh, but also this one, and this one, and this one was also really good. So in no particular order and with many caveats and notes, here are my best reads of 2018. Oh God. The first one that I read in this year, I read it so long ago, and 2018 has felt like so long that I was like, really? That wasn't 2017? And I definitely have talked about it before on my channel now, I think with reading memoirs. But Lab Girl, I apparently read really early this year, like in January, by Hope Jaren, and I really loved it. It's a really beautiful book. I am not a science person whatsoever, but this made me interested in science a little bit. You can tell that she kind of has a humanities brain and a science brain, which is rare, I feel like, or the patriarchy lies and tells us that those things are not interconnected. So yeah, I have never been as fiercely feminist as I am in this past year. So yay, feminism! So, Lab Girl, highly recommend. A recommendation from NPR and Erin Dillman of The Bibliotherapist. Whose channel is lovely, and she is so prolific this year. Okay, next, what did I read after that? I think, I'm counting these as one book, and forgive me, Six of Crows, I've loaned it to someone, so I just have the jacket, but Crooked Kingdom and Six of Crows, I read them one after the other. I'm so glad that I didn't have to wait for Crooked Kingdom. I love these books. I named my card, which I got this year in April, after Matthias, who is my favorite character, because he's basically Vegeta. I love him so much, and come talk to me about this, please. And then somewhere around that time, I read my first Colleen Hoover book, November 9, which is one of her most recent ones. I really enjoyed this. Do I think it's great literature? No. Are there some problematic elements? Yes. Is it also really cute romance that I listened to an audiobook in like under one day? Yes. I think it's great. I've learned a lot about characterization from her books, which I've started to read this year. I read this one, and then immediately after I listened to the audiobook, which is the same thing, but different. I listened to the audiobooks, which I borrowed from my library via Libby. I listened to Maybe Someday, which I did not like nearly as much as this. I think I just listened, like it was too similar, too fast. I should have given myself some time between, and I think I would have liked it more. I also did not like those characters as much as I liked these characters. And then most recently I read Confess, which I don't have the physical book for any book but this. Confess I really liked a lot too. Again, problematic elements, but also really good characterization and good story, and I devoured the audiobook from the library very quickly. So if you're looking for a cute but problematic romance, aren't they all? I recommend Colleen Hoover. And I would go with November 9 or Confess. Those are the ones, I mean, I'll read more of them, but I'm making myself space them out because of the problem of Maybe Sunday. I mean, maybe someday. As you can tell, I'm getting over, I mean, I'm no longer sick, but I still sound like this. Okay, after or around that time, I read Write Naked, a bestseller's Secrets to Writing Romance and Navigating the Path to Success by Jennifer Probst. I am not aiming to write romance, but I kept seeing this book at Borders at Barnes & Noble, and I loved the simplicity. I'm a sucker for millennial pink, who isn't? And I am currently trying to collect all of the Writer's Digest books that I want to read, and so I picked this one up. I don't remember if I ordered it on Amazon or actually bought it in the store. I'm trying to buy more books in store now that I can afford to do that. So Amazon is, of course, I'm still a sucker for Amazon, but I am trying to move away from that as much as possible. So this book is not necessarily just for writers of romance. It is just for writers, period. Some chapters, like how to expand a romance novel into a series of novels, might not be as applicable to other genres as romance. But like for fantasy, there are lots of elements in here that I can use because I write primarily kind of light. No, I write fantasy, but I like having a romantic plot in there. I mean, who doesn't? I'm trying to subvert tropes and not make my romances as problematic as some. So I recommend this book if you want to write at all. It's just really good. It is an adult book. There's excerpts of her romance novels in here, and they're steamy, so be aware. But the writing advice is really solid, and I'm trying to get my friend Cherish to read this book because she needs to read this book. Because she is now a contracted, agented author. I am so proud of her. I'm gonna start crying and ruining my eyeliner, so Cherish, I love you. Anyway, expect her book, if they keep the title that I came up with, Right Into His Arms. It will be out September 2019. I will be talking about it nonstop, and I will be reading it again, and I'm so excited. Please go follow Cherish of the Molly News. Anyway, also in the Writer's Digest series, I read Damn Fine Story because this title is great. I mean, the title is great, the cover is beautiful, I am a sucker for red. Chuck Wendig is hilarious. This book, I mean, when a book has a lot of tabs on it, that means I enjoyed it and found things worthwhile. I also used my fancy red highlighter. This book was great, and his humor keeps you, like, I literally laugh out loud, and that is not something I do all the time when I read, so I am looking forward to more of his books. I've never read any of his fiction, but I follow him on Twitter, and that's also really funny. The problem that I ran into with November 9, reading too many Colleen Hoover books in a row, meaning more than one, I ran into that problem with Susanna Kearsley because last year I read and loved The Rose Garden. This book is fantastic. I can't wait to reread it someday. Bought and read a little bit later The Shadowy Horses, and this book has such a great ending, and it really surprised me, and so I kept waiting for a similar kind of thing to happen in The Shadowy Horses, where it was like building and building and building, and then I apologize if people out there really love that book. I know one of my followers on Instagram was like, oh, you're reading that one, I love it. And that kept me excited as I was reading it, and I liked the characters and everything. The ending was just really lackluster to me. So that did not make my list. However, I gave myself a couple of months and then began listening to the only audiobook that my library had from Susanna Kearsley's back catalog called Mariana. And oh my God, it might be my favorite book of the year. I listened to the audiobook in under a week probably, and I immediately started listening to it over again because I loved it so much. And I went out and, well, I ordered a used copy because I mean, I kind of like these covers, but I really liked this cover, which puts more focus on the house rather than a female character. And look at it, it's so beautiful. I love this book. It's the winner of the 1993 Catherine Cookson Fiction Prize, and well earned. Never heard of this prize before, but this book is so well crafted. Like, everything comes back together, and the ending has that great, like, surprise that I wanted from Shadowy Horses and didn't get. I definitely will read this book over and over throughout my life because it's kind of like, it felt like sitting next to a fire with hot chocolate and reading a book. Like, it made me feel like that even though I wasn't doing that. I was listening to the audiobook while like doing laundry and driving to work and at work, and I just love this book so much. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so both times I listened to the audiobook, I have not read the physical book on its own. I mean, I did kind of read along at parts, but oh my god, I haven't filmed in so long, I'm out of breath. That's sad. If you ever would like to do like a read along of this book, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. Probably, maybe not like my, I mean, no, I think it's tied for favorite book of the year because I will now go to other favorite book of the year. Let's put that right there. So this year I picked up and read a little bit after Emma Watson's book club read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It was funny because this book it kept being hinted at by other books or on the internet. Like I follow Emma Watson on Instagram and stuff, and so I was like, oh, she's reading that and the book is pretty and, you know, it's a classic, I'll read it, but not maybe right now. And then I read How to Find Love in a Bookshop, which was cute, but not like, I really enjoyed reading it, but it's not one of my favorite books of the year. Like, it was kind of it was a good lazy read. Like, it did not challenge me in any way, but one of the characters is named Rebecca after Rebecca. And so they talk about that and it's like, okay, that's it. The universe is telling me to read Rebecca. So I went to Borders, god damn it. I went to Barnes & Noble with my husband and I got this beautiful, it's not as beautiful as like, I really want the 80th anniversary edition that's white with like the embossed cover and everything, but I couldn't find it in a bookstore, so I just bought this. And I loved this book. Like, it's so good. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. I have not yet seen, but am going to watch both the Laurence Olivier film adaptation and the Charles Dance film adaptation, both of whom I'm like, yes, that's a great choice for, what's his name? Maxim de Winter. This book is a classic. I love it. I would also do a read along of this if you want. And two things that these, I think I read Mariana and then went right into Rebecca, and they really like, this is the light and happy version, this is the dark and gloomy version, but they both have in them these really beautiful, well-established settings, particularly of houses. This has, does this even have a name? Oh, Greyweathers and Manderley, and they have inspired in me the feeling of wanting to write a book with a similar kind of atmosphere. Because while this felt, no matter where I was, like I was under a cozy blanket, this felt like I was walking through a gothic forest the whole time, and it was great. I definitely will read this multiple times in my life. I'm gonna read other things that she's written. These two together, they really play off each other well, and they're so different, but they have similar themes. I mean, they're both kind of gothic. This is way more gothic. This is like gothic in the sunshine. Like, I can't really, no, I mean, that's the best way to explain it, but I love them equally. I will probably reread this more, but I also, I mean, but this is a really challenging book, and the language in this book is so beautiful. The first chapter, at first when I was reading it, I was like, what is going on? But now when I read it, I go, like, now that I've read the whole thing, when I read through it again, I'm going to, like, the first chapter is gonna kind of break my heart. I think you should read them. And if you read any books from what I'm talking about today, I would recommend, well, if you read any book at all, depending on your personality slash what you want to read, I would recommend Rebecca. If you want something gothic and dark, if you want something cozy, read Mariana. And then read the other one. And then we can talk about it. Okay. I couldn't make a favorites video without mentioning Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. I read it upon release. Oh, it was a really good sequel to Vicious, which I have read 3 times, I think, because I taught it in university, and I taught it to freshman comp students, and they really liked it. I feel like it wrapped up the story really well, although it also leaves the possibility of a 3rd book, but I don't know if Victoria is still planning on that. But it's so beautiful, it's so good. But yes, I really enjoyed this. It's a great sequel. It does not disappoint. I can't really say stuff without like giving away the plot, but if you haven't read Vicious and Vengeful, I recommend them, as with all of V.E. Schwab's books. Da, da, da. The next book I read kind of is in a theme. So Mariana and Rebecca have, now that I've finished writing a draft of The Value of Memory, my novel that I am proud of, and like it is what I want it to be, I feel done with it for now. And like, I know I need to revise it again, but I can stop and I can write something new. And these 2 books made me want to write a book with a setting like that and a romance like that. And I want my main character to be a witch. And I don't know why all of a sudden I'm like really into witches. And so I read The Witch of Willow Hall, which I read a tiny like highlight about in Writer's Digest, the magazine, and I picked this up at Barnes & Noble. Finally, I didn't say Borders. It's a debut and it takes a while to get going, but man, does it get going. Like I took like a month or so to read the first 150 pages, and then I hit a certain point of like, and then I finished it in, 2 or 3 days. Oh, it's really, like, it's not the best book I read this year, but it's definitely a perfect fall kind of spooky read. Like, it's just spooky enough where you're not scared out of your mind, and it's still sweet, and it's a really good update. I mean, it takes place in early 1900s, I think. Checking. 1811. Oh, I'm way off. So, but is that where it actually takes place, or is that the prologue? No, okay, so 1811, so pre-Victorian, but it's in America. It's a really, but you can tell it's been written now because there are so many things in it that maybe a Gothic novel written contemporaneously, if that's the right word, with that time would not have included. But there's a lot of, like, it's a feminist Gothic tale, where some Gothic tales are, I mean, they're feminist, but they're dated. This one does a really good job of not turning the heroine into a ball of mush, it's a really, really good Gothic Gothic feminist fantasy. And the fantasy is pretty light. I mean, it's there, but the book, I hope she writes a sequel, I guess is what I'm saying, because the fantasy picks up the further you get into it. And I was like, oh, I wanted to learn more about this magic system and things. And it definitely ends at a place where book 2 could definitely happen and explore that a lot more. So, like a 4 stars, but 4.5-ish. Like the first half of the book, I understand why it was so slow, but if I read it again, I might skip the first 100 pages and just go to that one chapter where shit starts getting real. So, recommend, but give it time to get going. After I finished The Witch of Willow Hall, I was like, I still want to read about witches. I'm not done learning about witches, and I haven't really read books with witches as the main protagonist before. And since I want to write one, I should read more. And I had already purchased A Secret History of Witches by Louisa Morgan, which is a pseudonym. Her author bio is laughable. It's just Louisa Morgan is a synonym. A pseudonym. So I don't know if this is her debut or whatever, but it's very good so far. I am about halfway through. it follows 5 generations of a witch's family, and so it's broken down into books, and each book focuses for about 70 to 100 pages on one of the witches and her journey through learning her craft, becoming a full-fledged witch, that kind of thing. I am in the middle of Morwen's story right now, and I think she is my favorite of the witches so far. It's a really great book. The language is kind of simple, but there's a sort of magic in that, pun intended. And reading these two one after the other has shown me that I want my witchiness to be somewhere in the middle, because this is a lot more fantasy based and gothic, whereas this is kind of it's a believably real story. If witchcraft was real, and it feels almost like magical realism a little bit, because the magic is based in it's more of a witchcraft of potions, and the magic that the spells that they do, there's not a woo spell, which there really isn't in this either, but where in Harry Potter there's Wingardium Leviosa. In this one it's more they have a kind of meditative seance state, and things happen after that. They ask the goddess for things. Sorry if this is spoilers. But so I want my witchcraft to be somewhere between that. I want fantasy, but I also want some grimoire stuff. So yeah. But this is one of my favorite books of the year. I've been reading a book a night, except for last night because I binge watched Bodyguard with Richard Madden. It's real good. So I will probably finish this today or tomorrow, but it is one of my favorite books of the year. Other books that I'm not done with. I have been reading this slowly. This I purchased because I listened to Ariel Bissette's podcast episode about it. It's Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype. It's written by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, PhD. I'm probably butchering that, but it is a book. It's an academic type text, but it's really accessible. She writes about how women have been kind of curtailed. That's one of my favorite words right now. Curtailed by the patriarchy into being submissive and not listening to our core and our natural spirit and things. And it sounds a little hokey, but she's a legend collector, and she goes and collects stories from women of all different kinds of backgrounds, and she relays the stories here and then does a close reading sort of thing. It's kind of like a homily, except not religious. It's a meditation, an examination, a close reading of the message from the short stories. And it's not a book that it's not a book that I want to read front to back, quickly. Let's see, I started reading it November 9th. Ha! We've come full circle, end of video. No. And so now it is December 17th, and I'm only on page 34. Did they include the introduction? They do, okay. But I have really thought about the pages I've read. I've read the introduction and 2 of the stories, and I've really, really thought about them a lot. My mind comes back to them, and I try to think about, okay, what am I actually wanting to do? What is society kind of pressuring me into doing? It's very good, and I recommend it. And the last book on this list, kind of, how I was saying, this is kind of spooky but doesn't terrify you? There's a reason I haven't finished this book. It is The Dark Half by Stephen King. I am a huge fan of Stephen King ever since I read On Writing last year, maybe the year before, probably last year. And this is the first fiction of his that I have tried to read, and it is good. Like, I read like 50 pages at once, and then the next day I read like 150 pages without coming up for air, and it kicked my anxiety into overdrive. It's such an exciting plot, especially for a writer and a reader. The plot, without giving anything too much away, is that the main character, Thurston, it's been a while, Thad Beaumont, he is an academic writer whose own novels have sold really poorly, but he has a pseudonym under which he writes like murder mysteries and, well, they're crime novels, and those sell really well. And so that pseudonym, Thad decides to stop using that pseudonym. He decides to stop writing those books, and his pseudonym comes to life and starts doing things. It's so good, and the language is good, and it's terrifying, and I love it, and it is one of my favorite books of this year, but I haven't finished it because it's terrifying. I am on page 332 of 592. But I will definitely finish it. I actually had to talk to my therapist about this book because I was like, my anxiety has been so bad because I just started reading The Dark Half and I can't stop. And she's an avid reader of Stephen King as well. She loves it, and that was really fun to talk to her about with that. But so she has advised that I read not 150 pages in one go, like read a couple of chapters, see how you feel, and then maybe read something else, you know? So maybe if you are also facing anxiety from Stephen King books, just pace yourself. Okay, at 29 minutes, this video is ready to be done. Basically, I'm gonna end this. Thank you so much. Let me know below what your top reads of this year were. What are you excited to read next year? I hope to see you more, and Booksuda for now.